started, so I want to welcome all of you to this evening's general meeting of April 26th here at the Akwesasne Recreation Center. So I am going to call the meeting to order. We have attendance, moment of silence, acceptance of the agenda, rules of order, follow-up from the general meeting of March 29th. We have a presentation from Akwesasne, as well as a presentation on the tobacco pilot project. We'll provide an update on the Dundee land claim, as well as the Seaway claim, an update on a cannabis survey that the Mohawk Council undertook. As well, we'll provide an update on roads and upcoming construction within the community. An update on the proposed natural gas expansion in Gawanoya. We'll take business from the floor, we'll entertain a resolution, make announcements of the next district and general meeting. So that is our proposed agenda. Could I have a mover to accept? It is Joe and Karen. All in favor? All right, thank you. So we do have a few members of council that aren't able to join us this evening. Chief Adams Phillips is sick this evening. Chief Soshi is out of the office for the week. So is Chief Darrell Lazor, as well as Chief Louise Thompson and Chief Vince Thompson are all out of the office this week, utilizing vacation time. So I do just want to hold a moment of silence. We had enacted the protocol early in 2015-2016 when this council took office in recognition of those members that we had lost from the last general meeting. That's part of the cancellation protocol, that we don't cancel a general meeting. We'd rather remove it from a district that may have lost a member. So we'd like to pay tribute and recognize all those members that we have lost over the last month. I'll ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. I do want to extend our deepest condolences to all those affected by loss over the last month on behalf of council. So just rules of order for this evening. We do, again, we record our general meetings, which are streamed to the community members to listen in on the presentations, as well as a dialogue between council and community members, so that we do have the cameras set up over here. This evening we do have Akwesasne TV joining us as well. They will be, they have done an article or a news clipping on the proposed natural gas pipeline, so they will be here for that discussion. They'll be here for the entire meeting, but taking parts of the discussion and presentation on the natural gas pipeline to make up one of their articles. So they are not, the general meeting is not being streamed through Akwesasne TV, only the portion of the natural gas pipeline, but they will be here for the entire meeting. So our meetings will start at 6 p.m. and will proceed to approximately 8 p.m. depending on the discussion. It may go further. Personal issues will not be dealt with in the public forum here at the general meeting. As well, when addressing council or addressing issues within the Mohawk Council, we ask that we please do not reference names, or also members of council do not use members and names of the community in attendance, simply because we are recording and we don't want to identify whom is saying what. Is more about the dialogue and not the individual. So also protecting employee rights of the Mohawk Council. We ask that you please raise your hand when you have a question about what the subject matter is. I will take a list of names and we'll call upon you when your time comes to speak or ask a question of council. As well, we ask that you please keep your questions relevant to the item on which we're talking about. So if other items you want to talk about or discuss or address council, we do have a time on the agenda, which is business from the floor, to talk about that. So. As well, through our general meeting, if there are any items that we cannot answer at the general meeting here, we will take it back for follow-up items reported next month. As well, any personal issues will be dealt with on a one-to-one basis outside of the public forum if need be. Also, the meetings are designed for members only. People that are not members of the Akwesasne community are not allowed to attend the general meetings unless the community agrees to that at the general meeting. But the procedure regulations do strictly identify that the meetings here tonight are designed for members of the community only, to have dialogue with council and amongst ourselves. So that is our rules of order for this evening. So we will move ahead. There are packages that are available at the back for you. So we will go through the follow-up items from the last general meeting of March 29th. So one of the follow-up items was the follow-up to the St. John Tribe and Mohawk Nation regarding the Haudenosaunee Grand Council reiterated position on elected council. So we have scheduled a leadership meeting. We had actually scheduled one in April of 2018. Unfortunately, it was canceled at the last moment. So we will be rescheduling one with the tribe and the Mohawk Nation to talk about the Haudenosaunee Grand Council's position on elected council. So that will drop forward at one of our general meetings. Also, the follow-up with a letter to the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Indigenous Services and Crown Relations regarding our position on surplus lands. At the last general meeting, the community brought forward an article about the surplus lands on the in the city of Cornwall. A letter is being developed to be sent to the minister and the Ministry of Transport, reiterating that we do have an interest in those lands because it is part of our traditional territory, and that the government of Canada does have an obligation and duty to consult with us should they sell or divest or whatever process they may use affecting those lands. As well, a follow-up request from the last general meeting, there was a request to increase the $150,000 to $1 million for the community fund. So every year we put out a call-out known as the Akwesasne Community Fund, community organization, nonprofit to apply to. The community member requested that we consider increasing that amount. So that will be under review by the Finance Committee and for recommendation of Council. That will take some time. So follow-up to set up a political service agreement for community input. So one of the meetings here, actually, I believe 3 months ago at the general meeting here in Snai, we had a presentation on the political service agreement. As well, had a presentation at one of the other general meetings. There was a request for more meetings, specific meetings on that. That did occur on last Friday, April 20th. There was a number of community members who attended and provided input. So that has been taken care of. So that's our follow-up action items from March 29th general meeting. We will move along to the first presentation of this evening. So I do want to welcome staff from the Untitled program to come forward and provide you with an update on the progress of the program.
I'm just going to be a pretty face amongst them, so I'll maybe just a bit of an update. We did meet with Minister Bennett a week ago and provide her, I guess, our concerns about a few issues in the self-government agreement, and where we feel that we're trying to put together a chapter, a new policy that they've been engaged with, and it's a collaborative approach, but of course a lot of the work that's been done has not gone up to her, so we made her aware that there are some issues. That's on a general, that's on a national basis. The big thing that we try to impress upon her is that most of the self-government agreements, I think when we made a presentation last time, they're out west. They're out west, they're up north in the Yukon. Akwesasne is one of the first ones in the east. Their agreements have a lot to do with trying to, with leasehold interests, hotels and what have you, and to increase. And they're small communities. Ours is a large community. But what I've tried to impress upon her is that they've been in contact with Europeans for only 100, 150 years. We've well over 500 years. Our languages are strong, our traditions are strong, our customs are strong, our governments are strong. I think that that's what she understood that, and she now is going to hopefully have another meeting, set up a meeting face-to-face with her again, and talk about those issues. The other thing, of course, is that we have put together a lot of publications, and please, we have the evolution document, or you have it, and can you pick one up here? But anyway, what it shows is that Akwesasne has evolved, has continued to evolve in evolution. So I was going to have maybe Aaron to talk about that. So, because you've heard from me a lot. And, plus, for people who don't know me, I'm Peter Garl. My roots are the village, Ganadago, where The men are tough and the women are tougher. All right. Erin.
I'm Erin from Indowa.we. I'm in the communications unit with Indowa.we. I put this together. It's basically the milestones from the 201 from about 1600 all the way to 2017 with the two departments splitting up. There is two other things that I didn't include because after it was printed, we realized that we should have added two more things. It's easy read and it's pretty simple and it just gives you a short description of each one. So please help yourself to the little booklets. The two things that we didn't put in was 1977 when the Haudenosaunee Confederacy traveled to Geneva.
Yeah.
And
from building, they had the traditional medicine put on a summit called Building Foundations. And they invited those people from here and also from the rest of the Haudenosaunee who came to Onondaga and then went to Geneva to start the whole process of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. To us, that was a key moment in history. So we want to put that in there because a number of the people from here talked at that building bridges.
And the History Summit that we held in March of 2017, which is not included. We'll probably do another second edition to this book, and we'll be working with Arrow because there's a lot that we could do on the other side of it and include that. So it'll be for everybody to look at, and it's educational. So help yourself to it.
Nola Mitchell's been working with us as an intern now for going on almost a year. Came to us as a summer student, and that is really helping us a lot in putting a lot of the work together, but coming to the meetings and plus we won't hold it against him because the Boston Bruins knocked off the Toronto Maple Leafs and that's his team. So.
Oh, you're in snide.
Okay, any questions? Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So we have scheduled Peter and his team to come in at least every month to provide an update on the process in which we are at, or to provide additional information to you on the Canada-Akwesasne South government negotiations. All right, so we do have another presentation this evening. I do want to ask the Director of the Nawago, Jim Ransom, to please come forward. He will provide you with the presentation on the Akwesasne Tobacco Pilot Project.
Thank you. There's copies of the presentation on the back page. If you'd like to have a copy. In talking about the tobacco pilot project, I can go to the first slide. In 2012, when Council came up with the strategy, they developed an economic recovery strategy. There were two parts to it. One was to manage tobacco in the community, and part two was to start developing an alternative economy in the community. So on the tobacco side, it was really about how do we legalize tobacco trade and address issues with Ontario, Quebec, and the federal government in the process. In the beginning and since 2012, Council set parameters as to if we're going to have discussions with Quebec or Ontario on the chance the federal government was willing to sit down, that these are the parameters that are reported. One is that Akwesasne will not be a tax collector for either of the provinces. Two, revenue generated by cigarette sales in Akwesasne stays in Akwesasne. Three, price parity or tax parity is not an option. And four, that trade of native manufactured cigarettes needs to be part of the discussion. In doing the work, it took us 5 years to develop the Akwesasne tobacco law. I didn't put a slide in here on it, but we created, there was an original tobacco bylaw from 1985. We updated it and created the Akwesasne tobacco law over 5 years. and had a referendum in June 2016 that passed. So we have our own tobacco law. Since then, we've been working with the province of Ontario and having discussions with them to get them to recognize it and a bunch of other things that I'll be talking about. The work with them led to them putting a proposal to all First Nations in Ontario in March 2017. And basically what they said was, if a First Nation develops its own tobacco law, its own regulatory framework, we will recognize it. If a First Nation creates its own structure that collects an administrative fee or a royalty or a stamping agent fee, we will recognize that. If the First Nation agrees to set it so that it's 80% of what the provincial tobacco tax rate is, we will, in exchange for that, share a part of all tobacco tax revenue in the province. And they set an amount, $120 million, to be shared with participating First Nations. And as a follow-up to that, they laid out a process to go down that path. And it starts with this agreement in principle. And it basically identifies the process for negotiating a final agreement with them. Council decided to go down that path, and if you remember, last year we had 3 consecutive general meetings in which we presented the agreement in principle and what it was about. Council signed that on December 20th, 2017. Since then, the Union of Ontario Indians in March of this year signed an agreement in principle. They represent 40 First Nation communities. Prior to Council signing it, the Chippewas of the Thames had signed an agreement in principle. AIAI, the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians, is presently researching and deciding whether they would enter into an agreement on behalf of 7 more First Nation communities. So there is interest in this. It's growing. It's similar to when the OLG funds were first made available, in that, it went along a similar path of getting First Nation support for it. So the agreement in principle led to negotiating the final agreement. And what I'm going to present is a high-level review of what's in the tobacco final agreement that's been negotiated. First and foremost, it's an agreement between Ontario and the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. The federal government has not been previously interested in having a discussion on tobacco and tobacco issues at Akwesasne. We had actually started in 2012 with Quebec, and Council had been meeting with Revenue Quebec and had discussions with them. They called an election, and the party that was in office got unelected. The party that came into office got rid of everybody that was working on the file. And so since that election, there's been very little interest on the part of Quebec to sit down with Council. So that's, just to make you aware, that's the impact elections can have. The next slide, the agreement itself reinforces the right of members of Akwesasne to purchase cigarettes in Akwesasne, tax exempt from Ontario taxes. Section 87 of the Indian Act guarantees that right. The agreement reinforces it and puts it in it so that members of Akwesasne are not subject to provincial taxes. The agreement would recognize the Akwesasne tobacco law and would exempt those that are in compliance with it from the Provincial Tobacco Tax Act. So if we're licensing vendors, if we're licensing wholesalers that are transporting tobacco or cigarettes from Akwesasne to another First Nation community, the province would recognize our permit and they would be able to transport on provincial roads. That's an example of how that would work. The agreement would also legalize sales in Ontario to non-First Nation consumers of cigarettes from our Akwesasne vendors. Under the present quota allocation system in Ontario, the way it works is that the cigarettes are made available for sale in First Nation communities. It's supposed to be to other First Nation people. The province does not consider sales to non-natives to be legal in the system, and it's been a contentious issue across the province. Studies have been done, and 70% of sales in all First Nations are to non-natives. Akwesasne is the only one that if a non-native purchases cigarettes, they have to go through customs. And so customs will harass them, will hold them for Ontario, and they could be charged. So as a result, the system hasn't been working here. We get 147,000 cartons allocated to us. Our vendors are only selling 20,000 cartons. And that's because of three things. One is the toll booth, two is the mixed traffic corridor, and three is CBSA and customs. This would address that. The next slide. In order for the agreement to work and for the sales to the non-natives to become legal, for the existing vendors, we would increase our stamping agent fee from $5.10 per carton to $25. But in doing that, we would then rebate or refund back to the vendor $20 of that. So they would stay at the $5. And it's a model based on the state of Washington. And what they do there is the tribes charge the equivalent of the state tax in the state of Washington. They then rebate back to their individual stores part of that, and that addresses the pricing. So for us, it would the net result is the pricing would stay the same, and it would not impact on our vendors, but it would qualify to help get the sales to become legal. The second part would be to open a store on Hamilton Island, and at that one location, the stamping agent fee would be $29 per carton. There would be no rebate. The target audience or the target customers would be non-natives. And if we did those two things, Ontario would provide Akwesasne with $7 million a year for a 10-year period as an initial payment to Akwesasne. The next slide. That's the main part of the proposal. When we finalized the agreement, we presented it to council and did a line-by-line read of the entire agreement, got their comments, and then they asked us to have a focus group meeting with the community about the agreement, and that we should do a similar exercise with the community as to what we did with them. Do a line-by-line reading, let people see it, comment on it, and so we did that. The first focus group meeting was on the island, and in that we got comments, and I've put them here to highlight the major comments that were made, and I'll go through those. the first comment was that the people present said, we should get a copy of the agreement so we can read it for ourselves. And so we followed up on that, and as a result, there are hard copies available. There's some in the back of the room. We've made it available at Yohahio here, at Justice Building in Ganadaga, and at CIA 3 on the island. The second comment that came back loud and clear to us was a request for more focus group meetings. We also got a request from members of council that why aren't you presenting to the other 2 districts? So we went back to council. They passed the Mohawk Council resolution, and it basically said there will be 2 more focus group meetings. We had one for the at Yohahio last night, and we have another one scheduled tomorrow night. And I'll come back to that. The third major comment that came out of the discussion was, can the community decide whether council should sign the agreement? The response is yes. After the focus group meeting, we looked at the agreement in principle, and in it was a 2-step process. First step was ratification by each party. Second step was signing it. When we prepared the final agreement, we forgot to include the first step, the ratification. So we've recommended to council that we address that. It's not in the current agreement, but we will add into the current agreement that first step. That community ratification of it occur, and that if it results in the community approving it, then council will sign it. And that it be done through a community referendum. The next page. We had comments about the Hamilton Island store that's being proposed. And will MCA own the Hamilton Island store that is proposed was the question. The answer is yes, and the reason is to limit liability with that store. And to do that is to put it under one of MCA's corporations. And if a corporation owns it, it severs liability from the rest of the community. Only the corporation is liable should something happen. So that's what's being proposed. The second part is who will operate a Hamilton Island store. We had listed options in the agreement that it could be a corporation for MCA, it could be another entity of MCA, or it could be a community member selected to operate it. The feedback we got was to make the last option first, and so we're going to rewrite that part of the final agreement, and it will state to the effect that MCA will own the building and then lease it out to a community member. And then it becomes a matter of a process to select who that will be, and it will be up to us to figure that out. Some type of request for proposals makes the most sense. The next slide, we had questions about, does the agreement represent price parity or tax parity? For the existing vendors, it's clearly no. It maintains the status quo for them. They pay the $25 in the higher stamping agent fee, but we rebate back to them $20 of that. So the net effect is still the $5, which is the current royalty that's charged to them. For the Hamilton Island store, the answer is no as well, but the stamping agent fee will be set to within 80% of the provincial tobacco tax rate, and if that changes, it will match it, and it will maintain that 20% difference between what's in the province and what's at that store. The next slide. We had questions about the $7 million annual payment to MCA. And the question was, is the proposed $7 million annual payment from Ontario for 10 years? Yes, it is. The agreement commits Ontario to make that payment for 10 years for a total of $70 million over that time period. There was a question about whether that payment would be considered own source revenue, and that becomes important because if a First Nation creates own source revenue, the federal government will attempt to claim that, well, if you're making your own money, you don't need ours. And they would try to claw back funding that goes to a First Nation. So we have to be aware of that. We've spoken with one of our lawyers. His advice is that no, it will not be considered own source revenue. It will be treated similar to the OLG revenue that comes to council. The next slide. There was a question about the $7 million again, and the question was really, if MCA gets paid $7 million, how is it going to spend it? And the answer to that lies in the Akwesasne tobacco law. Section 5.2 is called Community Responsibility, and it lists how tobacco revenue money is to be spent. And it's pretty broad. Health, education, economic development, social. So it includes pretty much every service delivery that's provided to the community. The last slide talks about next steps. We're planning to hold a focus group meeting at Ganadago Recreation tomorrow night from 5 to 9. What we do is we go line by line through the entire agreement. It's non-stop for the first hour, and then after we're done, we open it up to take questions about the agreement itself. Based on the 3 focus groups, we will make changes to the tobacco agreement. Our proposal is to present it to council for acceptance of the draft for a community referendum. And then the community referendum, we believe, should take place probably late summer of this year, depending on a couple of things. The election for MCA and the election in Ontario, and whether or not the parties are still interested in going down this path. So that's the update on where we're at, and I'll take any questions people have.
Go ahead.
At the beginning of your presentation, you said that the federal government has no interest in discussing this with you.
Yeah, back in 2012, they had absolutely no interest under the Conservatives. And so council had actually started with Quebec. And then Quebec had the election, they lost, and then the next Quebec government had no interest. When we had started with Quebec, Ontario was there as observers, and after Quebec withdrew, they said we would be interested in having further discussions. So that's how we ended up with Ontario. The federal government has not been a participant. However, we approached them and had a meeting with them in March, and just to update them on what we're doing with Ontario. and to let them know that we would be interested in having a discussion with them because there are implications on the relationship with the federal government from this agreement. In particular, if we legally are able to sell cigarettes to non-First Nation customers, they will attempt to claim the HST. And so we're trying to address that issue. There's an opportunity to have discussions about the federal excise tax and whether or not they would consider giving that up to an MCA jurisdiction. There's also an opportunity, we believe, to start a discussion about past cigarette smuggling related charges for community members and whether or not, if we have an agreement with Ontario, the federal government would consider pardoning those charges for individual community members. The thinking is similar to what's happening in other jurisdictions with marijuana, in that as mostly states in the United States pass legislation legalizing marijuana, they're also passing legislation to forgive marijuana charges of people. So we're saying, hey, they're doing it in that situation, why not in our situation? And that it would be a case-by-case basis, but it would certainly be worth pursuing. We know that for individuals that have such charges, it's difficult to get a job. And we want to address that.
Go ahead, what's your further question?
Just, your focus is on your pilot project around the Hamilton Island store, right? Like that's your hypothetical, this is where we're going to sell it tobacco. Do you find it like ironic that there was just a big load of tobacco raided or stopped coming off Hamilton Island? And how many non-native residents actually stay there compared to natives? I think there's no Indians that live there, right?
There's a couple.
3 or 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here you are presenting a pilot project to the community when there's smuggling happening right on the same island that you're talking about, and it's in the news right now. You know, like the irony of that.
Yeah.
So how do you combat that?
Yeah. That situation is going to be there regardless of what we do. And in general, we're trying to legalize trade and by doing so, reduce the incentives to smuggling. The smuggling from the U.S. side to the Canadian side is less an issue today than it was 10, 15 years ago. It's been replaced more by other individual First Nations opening up manufacturing in their own territories and transporting off reserve. I think that's become a bigger issue. The project itself, the key part is not focused on the Hamilton Island store. The key parts are to get the province to recognize the Akwesasne tobacco law as being legitimate, to respect it, that if individuals are in compliance with it, that if we're able to do trade with other First Nations, that it will be recognized as trade and that OPP will not stop shipments. You know, that by us having our own regulatory system, putting in the pricing and non-pricing controls, that the province be prepared to give up any claim to provincial taxes on sales to non-natives from our stores and thus legalize that. You know, so those are really what we're after. The Hamilton Island store enters the picture because it helps to trigger that $7 million annual payment to the community without impacting our existing vendors.
Thanks.
Sorry.
One more, and then we're gonna move to the next.
So, okay.
No, I mean, one more question.
Okay, so regardless if this is, if you get the 1+ vote through the referendum and it's passed, regardless if it's successful, which I don't think it's gonna be, because you're trying to add $1,500 to the price of a case of cigarettes with your $29 or your $25, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's locking Ontario owing us $70 million, regardless if you're successful. Is that what you're saying? Like, you're gonna get the yeses, 1+, and it's gonna become law, and regardless if it works or not, Ontario's gonna owe us $70 million.
Yes.
Okay, well, say it like that. You know, like, I'll help you pass this
Yes.
ridiculous law if we're gonna get $70 million. You know what I mean? Like, that's layman's terms, no?
Yes.
Like, it saves you from getting a sore throat talking about this, you know? Like, help us get this $70 million.
Okay, thank you. Over here.
That's a good segue to the comment. I've been to all the presentations, so the presentation on Going Oregon, the question on the focus group comments is the proposed $7 million annual payment from Ontario for 10 years. Yes, the agreement commits Ontario to make that payment for 10 years. I just wanted you to explain that it could change, and how does it change? Because you explained it to us on the island.
Yes.
That is not a 100% commitment per year. So the $7 million is not
Yes.
100% here.
The intent is that it's guaranteed for 10 years. What could happen is that we would be the First Nation to enter into this agreement. So there's 120 million that's available. There's another 40, approximately 41 that have started down this path right behind us. And then there's 7 more that are considering it. So as more First Nations decide to do this, then that 120 million starts getting divided amongst more participating First Nations. So the province would have to come up with a formula for how they're going to distribute it. And it's going to be population-based. Will be a big part of it. So as being the second largest First Nation in Ontario behind 6 nations, we would get the second largest proportion. But we don't know if it's going to be 7 million. It may be less. So we wanted to lock them in for that 10-year period at the 7 million. We also said to them, because we're the first, we're taking the biggest risk and trying to see if it works. So we said if that formula that's worked out results in us being eligible for a bigger amount than 7 million, we want to be able to get that. And so in the agreement, it says that should the formula indicate that we get a higher amount, then the following year it would kick in at that higher amount. So that's how it works. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and just my last question is, in the slide that talks about the corporations that MCA owns, so what corporations does MCA currently own?
There's 2 corporations. What's the first one? Akwesasne has been here for a number of years, and it's a holding company for land purchases. Three Feathers Corporation is new, and we've created it with the intent to be the economic development arm of council.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question right here up the front.
I was wondering if you can do all this on Hamilton Island, why can't you do it on Cornwall Island? And the corridor stays the same, and you work out these things that need to be ironed out with the borders. You're cutting the heads off of all of these people who are in business right now, because nobody is going to come from Cornwall to purchase cigarettes on the island. And we all know nobody in Akwesasne smokes Canadian cigarettes because none of us can afford it. So
Right.
why can't you bring that to Cornwall Island?
We could, I think the province would consider that, but we're trying not to compete with the existing vendors. And
No, there's going to be no competition once you lock them all out.
the price will still be cheaper on the island than,
How can they make money? They're not going to come to Cornwall Island to buy cigarettes.
that's the problem we have right now.
They still come though.
The numbers don't show that. I mean, the problems with Cornwall Island are threefold. One is the mixed traffic corridor designation. If you're coming from the U.S., you can't stop on the island. So that's a 50% drop in their business. The second issue is the toll booth. So in order to stop on the island coming from the U.S. side, you have to go through the toll booth, report at customs, turn around, come back, report at customs again, make your purchase, go back through customs, or go back through the toll booth, through customs, and then off the island. That adds about $10 in tolls to your purchase. You combine that with the customers have to report through customs and they hassle people. You combine that with the stores on the U.S. side provide cigarettes at such a low rate that people will go and buy there versus the island. So we're facing all of those things right now. And that's why cigarette sales keep dropping for us. And it's down to 20,000 cartons when our allocation is 147,000 cartons.
That's because you charged at 5.10 and now you want to charge 29.
The numbers don't show that.
Okay, the question way in the back.
First of all, I'm not a cigarette person, I don't understand this, but what I do understand is this. You're concentrating on tobacco, you're concentrating in Ontario. Does that not apply to the other two districts in Quebec? Or does that exempt them from this agreement? Because you're asking the entire council, which represents all three districts, but you concentrate only on Cornwall Island. Okay?
Yes.
So I understand that, but why don't you try that same concept, but allow the cigarette stores in the other districts to do the same? And why does the federal government have their nose in the tobacco sales in Akwesasne, and is the next thing they're going to have their nose in on the sales of gasoline?
Yeah, to your first question, I think you got here a little bit late. We actually, I'd like to explain. We actually started our discussions with Quebec.
I was here when you said that.
Okay, so when the government changed in Quebec in 2012-13, they walked away, and they haven't come back.
Okay.
So Ontario said, we'll fill in for them and we'll have discussions with you.
So this also.
So that's why that happened. Ontario only has jurisdiction in Ontario, not in Quebec. What we're proposing is that if we can reach agreement with Ontario, we can then sit down with Quebec and say, here's what's happening, we'd like to extend it into Quebec.
And if they say no, then what?
Then it's no different than what it is right now. It stays status quo.
And is that detrimental to the community?
On the business side, it potentially is, but we've got at least two of our vendors are in the Quebec districts. And if you're targeting non-First Nation customers, the two Quebec districts are at a disadvantage because you're not going to get non-natives to drive from Dundee or Cornwall into them to buy cigarettes and then drive back out and have to report through customs. That's the challenge there.
Yeah, but you get non-natives coming to activities in Akwesasne and they drive through the border and they drive back. So you're going to make a sale on cigarettes or whatever, you have non-natives coming to a big thing that's happening in Snai and this recreation, you have a lot of them. What's the difference? If there was a store down the road and they went to buy cigarettes there, what's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, they can do that right now and run, I mean, they would run into the same problems at the Cornwall Port of Entry, only would be at the Dundee Port of Entry. As soon as they report, they'll be asked, do you have cigarettes? And if they have cigarettes from Akwesasne, then it becomes an issue.
Even more of an issue when you're regulating the prices, right?
What do you mean by regulating the prices?
Adding prices to the current value of the cigarettes.
Yeah, for the existing vendors, it doesn't change. It's just that one store location that will be different.
Are there any other questions on this? Comments? Go ahead.
Just a comment. Tomorrow is the final focus meeting. Will Bonnie be there?
I believe so.
Can you ask her to research the Bomberry case? Because the Bomberry decision, because I want to ask her a few questions on it. The Bomberry versus the Ontario Ministry of Revenue. It's an older case, but the decision in it, based on what I've read, I just want to ask her a couple questions to this decision to how the province was allowed to get to where they're at right now in doing what they're doing here.
Okay, I'll ask her. I don't know if she'll have the time, but I'll ask her.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, in the back, and then over here.
Yeah, my question is, everybody's focusing on this $70 million, 10-year term. What's the effects after that? Because the way the government makes their decisions is always on a 25, 50-year plan, 100 years. So what is the long-term effect? I mean, everybody's looking at this little carrot right now. But at the long-term effects, what's going to happen? We're going provincial? Where are we going?
Yeah.
This is what I would like to know.
Yes. It's a very good question, and the approach we're taking from the economic development side is that the money is not the goal. If you make money the goal, then you're lost.
Exactly.
But if you develop a strategy that looks at the long-term viability of the community and lays out a plan, then the money becomes a tool to help you achieve that. So the economic recovery strategy from 2012 was two parts. One, manage tobacco, but two, move toward another economy in the community that's more sustainable, that's not so controversial, and that's what we're working on. At the same time we're working on tobacco. So we agree, and we're hoping to have some announcements in the next couple of months about that.
Okay, over here. Yes.
Jim, you said the council controlling the Hamilton Island?
The store?
The island.
The island? Yes.
Well, they gave that up and they gave it to the Chinese, remember? Not too long ago.
Yeah, you'd have to bring it up to their attention.
So that means they don't have nothing anymore. Where do they come?
Yeah. You'll have to bring that to council.
Well, they're right there. I think there's my right or wrong.
We still retain the control and ownership of Hamilton Island at this point. There's no Chinese there that I'm aware of.
No.
We can double check. Over here.
2110, just for council's information, the parties agreed to meet and work towards coming to agreement on including products other than cigarettes in this agreement. At last night's focus meeting, we really stressed council consider deleting that section because we didn't want to see the rippling effect to every product that anybody tries to open a business in the territory falling into the same tax parity type situation of whatever commodities somebody else might be interested in starting business. I used a bad example of alcohol last night because I know we don't there's a bylaw that says we don't sell alcohol, but we all know in reality it happens in the community. But just wanted to point that section out, that we were requesting that somehow that section be deleted because of that wording, the way it's worded in other products.
Yeah, and we said we would explore it further. In hindsight, the language was put in there because our intent is to also address cigars, and I believe the HST is applied on sales of cigars to our vendors, and our hope is to address that. But if you feel that, if the community feels that it shouldn't be in there, we're willing to explore that with the province and see if they don't have any issue with it. It was never intended to go beyond that.
And just my final comment. He used the term that we're hoping the province will recognize our Akwesasne tobacco law. Since when do we need the province to be accepted of our laws when we're dealing at the federal levels of trying to get the federal government to recognize them? Why do we need the federal province's permission at all on our own tobacco law? I mean, I thought you guys would be real proud of that tobacco law, on how hard it was worked on and how fast it got done to start something internally versus having to wait on a province to be accepting of it. And in the tobacco law itself, it creates its own mechanism of how we want to govern ourselves and regulate it.
Yeah, the recognition of the tobacco law by the province is required under their legislation, and it's to allow certain sections of our tobacco law to be recognized by them. And if you read the draft agreement, it makes specific reference. I think they're Articles 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and they deal with manufacturing, they deal with wholesaling, they deal with transporting, and that in recognizing our tobacco law, those particular aspects, that includes us licensing our community members, by them recognizing that we've licensed these individuals when they travel on Ontario roads with products that are stamped and purchased through our system, then that will be legal and OPP will not stop those individuals. So that's why it's worded in there that way.
Okay. There's one straight in the back, and then over here.
I was just kind of wondering, what's the fallout if this referendum happens and the answer is absolutely no? Then what's your next step? What are you going to do next? Is it going to be done, deal, it's over, done, nobody accepts it, it's put on a shelf, archived somewhere?
That could be one of the end results. You could also attempt to see how close the vote is, and then have a further discussion to try to find out, was there one part of it that stopped it? And
a referendum is referendum, no,
right.
No, there's no gray area, black and white, there's no gray. No is no, done, over. Why rediscuss it? Why rehash something that's 3 focus meetings, general meeting, all done, referendum, no. Now what's your next project?
I'm just answering your question.
I realize that, but
if you don't agree with me, that's okay.
No, but why would you do it?
I'm not saying we would do it.
No, but why would you suggest that?
I'm telling you why we would suggest it.
Why?
Because there could be an issue that if it's addressed, it would result in a yes. Governments do this all the time. They try to find out why something doesn't work and fix it and then bring it back.
Okay. Over here, yeah.
The products that you right now you get 140,000 targets. What is that product? Where is it manufactured?
It's manufactured by the 3 main cigarette producers in Canada, and it's. So
you purchased them from Ontario?
They're purchased by wholesalers in Ontario that are licensed by the province.
So when you started this agreement, why didn't you fight more for Akwesasne cigarettes? Because that's the cigarette factories, they employ Akwesasne people. You would figure this agreement would, provide more jobs because the demand would be more like a circle of life. But really, you're buying from Ontario You know what I mean? Like it's...
Yes, yeah, no, yep.
Why doesn't the cigarettes that's manufactured here focused on more than Demoriers and Players?
Yes, yeah, there are no licensed manufacturers in any of the 3 districts. The Akwesasne tobacco law does include licensing manufacturers in the community, and we have one on the island that's applied. And so the agreement would allow the cigarettes that they manufacture to be transported to other First Nation jurisdictions under our system, and they would not be stopped. So it will address that.
But wouldn't you think that Ontario would be interested in curbing smuggling by letting Akwesasne make agreements with U.S. manufacturers that still employ people from Snai, Singers, and Cornwall Island? You know, and it's beneficial.
Yes.
To everybody. So why does it have to be a factory in Snai?
Yeah.
Or St. Regis or Cornwall Island? Why can't it be one in Hogan?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Because it saves them money and makes them money at the same time.
Yes, we had that conversation with them, and we had the same reasoning. And what they said in response is importing into Canada is not a provincial jurisdiction, it's a federal jurisdiction. So we would have to address it with the federal government. They did say to us that they would be willing to assist us in whatever way they can to make that happen, but that we have to resolve that with the federal government.
Okay. All right, so I just want to offer a bit of commentary to this. Council has not made the entire decision on this, and just to your comment though, one of the challenges is, well, not one of the challenge, but what it is that the law says that all other applicable laws may apply. So in the case of what you're talking about, if somebody wanted to bring the product from the Singers Mohawk tribe jurisdiction, they would have to apply for a license to import it to Canada, which means they would pay the federal excise tax on it and then would pay the royalty of whatever we assess them. So the advantage of people, why they buy the products, whether made here in Hoganburg or wherever, is because it's cheap, right? Not because, well, arguably the owners would say it's a good product. It probably is, but people are buying it because it's a lot cheaper than Marlboro's and Demoriers. So by applying the federal tax, you're starting to lose that advantage. By applying our 25 or 29, whatever it may be, or $5, you start slowly moving that marker there. To the question in the back about the law, if this does not go forward, in my mind, now this is a governance question, is regardless, the people have voted on a law. The law is still applicable, regardless of signing a deal with Ontario, which means that the Mohawk Council still has to institute all of the regulations that go with it. There's just no understanding between the community of Akwesasne in Ontario that some of the products can leave the territory, we'll say legally, according to them. So that's one of the challenges that we'll face. I know moving forward, personally, and I have told this to council, and this is not speaking out of turn, that I have a couple concerns with it, and one is precedent. And I'm not sure what precedent it sets, because although we may not have a super huge tobacco economy in our community like we used to at once upon a time, there are a lot of other communities in Ontario that are not very far, that have a lot of shops. In my mind, the Ontario government is trying to find a way to bring some of those huts or shops in line with what they view as, this bigger tobacco, we'll say, issue to them. So what does it set for Akwesasne being kind of a large progressive community? What does that kind of set for other communities as the province looks to roll this out to other places? There's no doubt, we have $7 million potentially for the next 10 years to gain out of this. But really it's at the cost of what? And I think the precedent is one big thing. The other thing is too though, if we're enforcing the law to the T of the law, those products you were talking about earlier that were coming off Hamilton Island, theoretically, we should be enforcing a law upon them saying, wait a minute, you're in a possession of a product that contravenes an Akwesasne law, therefore you're fined or you have to get a license or whatever it may be. The point being is that we now become responsible for enforcement that could potentially be a large enforcement issue, because we do know that products do flow back and forth through our territory with no sanction, right? Is it the province is looking to us now enforce? Arguably yes and no, but they're also giving us money if we sign this deal to enforce. These are some of the things that, I've expressed to council as a concern, but are we broke? No. Do we need the $7 million? Some would say yes, I would say no. Would it be good to have to move forward annually $70 million over 10 years? Absolutely. When we want to expand water lines, when we want to put new roofs on the recreation centers, we have an additional $7 million to be able to do that. We want to increase business development in other areas outside of tobacco. There's additional money. It is there. So those are really the kind of the cons and pros to where we want to go. Also, we've enacted a law, which the community has voted on, that the province arguably recognizes. Right? So it's recognizing our jurisdiction over a product made in our community. Some will argue, should we talk with the Fed, should we talk with the province? That's a discussion that we have to continue to have. Jim has outlined what some of the strategies going forward with the federal government. So really those are kind of the things that I would continue to say to council. At the end of the day, council will have to decide whether or not we're going to go into this, when a referendum will happen, and what is the benchmark that we feel we have satisfied the community's concerns at this point. So it has not been established right now. Council over the next couple of weeks will have this discussion of what those next steps will look like, and we'll communicate it back to you. The focus meetings that we have been having were because the council said, all right, we've seen the agreement, we want you to take it to the community, show it to them, get their feedback. That's what's happening. Yes.
This is directed to council. How do you plan on educating people before the referendum happens? Because a lot of people are not aware of how this quota system works.
Yeah, I think that we have to have that conversation as well. We do have these meetings, they are recorded, we put information out. We've had the focus meetings. That will be the next steps. Council will decide how we will get to the referendum point and how we will ensure that the community completely understands what this means, what the benefits are, and what some of the downfalls are. So I don't have a solid answer for you, but that is the discussion. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you make sure it's pretty factual, because this formula, the way he described it at one of the meetings, I'm a former smoker, but I was taken aback knowing that there's a price on every man, woman, and child's head in this community to the quota system. And we talk about a product that kills people, and if there's a price tag on our ban rolls based on every man, woman, and child, think about that, what we're doing here, promoting a product, and children are tagged to it. So I did some research today, as I said I would from last night's meeting, and I researched the formula stuff. And I'm hoping you verify that that's not true about children being part of this formula, because what I researched is said adults. So somebody on council, whoever is going to do another presentation, make sure it's factual, because it's upsetting to know that our children on ban rolls are calculated into a mathematical formula with a product that kills. So that's just my concern, looking out for the generations, the children in the next generations dealing with a product that can kill them.
Yeah. No, we can clarify that as we move forward. So thank you very much, Jim, for providing the information to us this evening. Okay, so we'll move along. We do have a few updates that we wanted to go over before we turn to business from the floor for this evening. So the next item, which is in the agenda package, is an update on the land claims. So we do have 2 active land claims as of right now that we Okay, I just want to say that information on both those claims, because we don't have final settlement agreements, is not for public distribution. I mean, it's for community use only. Until we have final settlement agreements signed and we know what the agreements are, we're still officially in negotiations with cannabis. That's not for distribution outside of this room. Okay, so we want to give an update on the cannabis survey in which the Mohawk Council had undertaken. So I look to one of the members of the committee to provide an update.
So real quick, since we have playoff hockey and NFL draft on tonight. So I just want to thank everybody who took the survey. The purpose of the survey was to get a sense of what the community thought of recreational cannabis in Akwesasne. So Bill C-45 has been through 2 readings and will go through another reading before it comes law if it's accepted. We do not have a final date for legalization. We're hearing possibly late summer. So there was 588 surveys that were completed, 84 from Ganadago, 170 from Gawanoga, 194 from Akwesasne, and 140 from outside the districts. And so currently those surveys are being validated and the final results should be ready in May sometime. And so when we get the results, we'll unfold it to the community and go from there. That's all. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
So how many times were people allowed to vote? Just once, or
just one time? So
they wanted to?
Yeah, there was, so of the 588, that doesn't mean there was 588 people that voted or that took the survey. So that's why it's going through this validation process now to determine, they're going to use the IP address at each household and determine how many were actually, so there's no duplicates.
I remember at the last meeting on the island was a person that was there, and she said she had already gone it 10 times.
She took it 10 times, yeah.
So how fair is that?
So they'll take away 9 of her survey the times that she took it.
Yeah, but if it's just paper form, you can just fill it out and drop it off at one place and fill another one out and drop it off at another place. Like your name isn't on there.
I believe it was
trying to verify handwriting?
I believe it was online.
Oh,
I think the 588.
They had those surveys at different hospitals.
Right. Yeah, they had paper results. Those were taken by our staff, and yeah, they were all tabulated.
Still not accurate. Like I could have. Anybody could fill one out here and go to the place and fill another one out.
Right.
Sure.
Troy, what's the plan if it's yes, like you're saying it may be rolled out, the results sometime in May? Or prep behind the scenes of yes, we're in favor? Is there law enforcement gearing up and everybody else gearing up for what?
Yeah, for sure. Our task group had the chief of police and another one of the police part of the committee, and so they're aware, and we did give it some thought, and then we decided to scale it back a little bit just to see what the survey says before we move forward. But we do, there are a lot of concerns either way, especially with if we allow it. You know, that has a lot of ramifications for the community. If we say no to it and Canada legalizes it, then that's, you know, it's definitely a tricky situation. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
There's an election coming in Canada. Do you think the Conservative government looking to be sort of victors? Justin Trudeau will be gone. Do you think it's going to have an effect on the legalization of marijuana?
Me personally, I think it will. Yeah.
Like the Conservatives, I don't think they're for it.
Right. So it could get turned down by Canada, It has to go through one more process, and it could be turned down, and, you know, that could also have effect on the way we vote. So.
Anybody else? Okay. Was that it for your update?
That's true. Yes.
Thompson? All right, thank you very much. Okay, we'll look to Chief Lazor to provide us an update on the roads and upcoming construction.
Okay. Okay, been working very hard with the team. We've put our team together and with the Department of Technical Services to address the potholes and the deteriorating of our roads. It's 6 years in the making with provinces. And finally, we put them, we kept meeting with them, and we even brought them here. We took them on bus rides, we took them on car rides, and we showed them the whole 9 yards. And like I said, you said earlier about the Conservatives that were before that, they wouldn't even open the doors for us. They wouldn't answer, no calls. But with this party that's sitting there now, gave word that they were going to help us and work with us as partners. So they come up with the regional office in Toronto, gave us 1.6 to do from Wade Memorial to the bridge. That road hasn't been addressed since 1973. And then we identified the emergency route going Wade Memorial right up to Chapman Road. That's another road that's deteriorating. So we're going to, the contracts are out with the designer, because INAC recommends or is a must that you got to have a contractor administrator. And the designer is JP2G. And they're ready to design. It's they're hoping to start the construction in about 3 weeks. So that's from the Wade Memorial to the bridge in Sugarbush. That's probably we're trying that to be like the phase 1. The phase 2 would be from Wade Memorial from Barbara Sunday's to maybe Chapman Road. That'd be another phase 2, because that's the worst roads right now we have. And with Quebec stepping out of the box, again, no returns of calls, but finally they came back to the table. And finally, through negotiations with the working team, we have a Quebec liaison person we hired. She speaks French and she's from here. We have Chelsea Francis that was sitting here, our administrator. We have Plan Chief. We have Jay, myself, and Vince. And we went to the table with Quebec many times. Finally, they came, because our contracts, they said that ran out, and that's why they never came back. So we had to renew the contracts. And from 2012, they went retro, because they never gave us no O&M monies. They never gave us repair monies, nothing. So they agreed to give us $200,000, plus an additional $600,000 to do whatever we want with the roads. So at that point, $800,000, we're trying to put it towards the Wade Memorial Road. And then last week we had we created called a tripartite group. We brought Ontario in, we brought Quebec in, and INAC in. And we sat at this table and we talked about the fundings and all that. And at that time, Quebec gave us another $100,000. This was just last week. So we have an additional $100,000 to go towards those roads. So it took a lot of negotiation to bring them provinces back to the table, and INAC itself. And hopefully with this working team we have, keeps on it. And again, if they go to a shuffle, Conservatives gets back in, we only have this much window to work with that, and we have to keep moving on that. So that's what we're doing with the road so far.
True, and they're not just going to come in and cover the potholes and that's it.
No. That's why I talked about the engineering firm that's hired. That road's going to be engineered all over again, right from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. It's going to be engineered. They're not just gonna fill the potholes, it's gonna be removing of all the gravel, all the existing cracked roads, and put fresh.
Go ahead.
Joe, I've been to quite a few district meetings in Ganadaga, and I think the Chief Lazar, every time I brought it to his attention about that weeds that week ago, and I know there's a list, and I said, I asked him to show us the list of the priorities of which roads need to be worked on first. And I'm glad you're presenting that, knowing that this district, here, we know which roads are going to be worked on. But do we have the list of Ganadaga and Gowinogan to see where your road sits, so to speak?
Yeah, yes, we do. The first time
I just asked him if you could publicly update.
we'll get those, I can get that more. Right now, one of the Ganadaga roads, two of the Ganadaga roads is the Park Avenue and the Hilltop. That's a priority list.
Okay.
The one Gowinoga is the one they just redone. I believe it's the Buckshot Road. That was another...
way in the back over here, yes.
Well, I think you mentioned Nye Road and funding from Quebec stepping out, and you're getting all this funding from the Ontario government. And you mentioned one road on Cornwall Island, which is Macomber Road. There's a lot more roads on Cornwall Island that are dirt roads. So where are we in line?
It's a study they do, and I don't think I mentioned Macomber Road, but I mentioned the Buckshot Road. The Buckshot Road was, they take the worst case ones, and what the funding they have is only so much. They had 600,000. We couldn't apply that to the roads in Ganadaga because Ganadaga was a higher ticket. We couldn't apply that to here because here is 1.6 and Wade Memorial is 1.7. So when they give you 600, we were shovel ready for Buckshot Road on Corner Island. They measure it out. The engineers tell you, yeah, 600 is enough. Do that road, and it's a must. It's on a priority that when the roads are start deteriorating, that's how they go by it. Because we couldn't apply if it's the Macomber Road, it may be more. So you go where they give you, but it's all surveyed and it's all ready to go. All the roads are ready to go to be repaired. We have roads in Snai, we have roads in Ganadaga, it's a desperate need. So if they give you 6, and Buckshot Road will fit that amount, that's where it went. That's how, and like I said, the 1.6 they gave us will fit here on the River Road from Wade to the bridge. And we're trying to put sidewalks in Ganadaga, add on so people can walk safely along the road there. And Ganadaga is so tight there, you have curb and gutter right now. What you're going to have to do is going to go get easements from people. How much are they going to give? Do they have enough to give? That's the study that's going on right now. We're trying to fix that Hilltop Road, and we're trying to put side roads in, and sidewalks. Sidewalks. So that's another directive we have. So we're trying to fix up all the roads. Because we took them, people right on bus rides, we took them all over. We showed them the deterioration of our roads.
Okay, we have another question over here.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What is, in your mind, because you're on this committee, what is the importance of paving dirt roads? Because there's a lot of dirt roads, like she said, Corner Island. I don't even think it's, maybe a little one in Sinkers, but it's not, it's still dirt roads, and they cause a lot of damage. So why repave pavement and not dirt? What's the significance of that?
Well, when I come on council, there was a plan already in place. A capital plan they called it, which reviews all the roads. And if, let's say, I'm not trying to shove nobody around here, but let's say it was a side road, there's only maybe 3 people living there. Compared to this main road right here, is used on a traffic volume of 1,000 compared to 5. You know, so they're gonna take this road that deteriorates right here. It's a must. And the road that to get out of here as a safe escape route, it's gotta be up to par. And that's one of the main roads. All the buses use that, delivery trucks, ambulance truck, fire truck unit, they use it. Beside a small gravel road on the side, because, and I checked the 20-year plan as how they get the funding. They're gonna address that, the pavement. That's the plan in the future for 20 years. But if this road here starts deteriorating, you can't even bring nothing back in here. You can't get out if something were to happen. So it's kind of a priority when you direct a safety road. And those roads are in bad shape. The main roads are in bad shape. So I hope I answered your questions.
Yes, go ahead.
For the roads, I remember a few years ago, Safe Walk came in and they met at the Tri-District Elders. Safe Walk is a project where you can apply for funding to put in sidewalks to make sure that people here can travel the roadway safely. And that's open to everybody. It's not open to just Cannabis or their community. It's open to everybody. So at that time they were presenting that everybody can apply, anybody can apply. So they came down here out of their request to present what they have to offer. I'm just wondering if council or anybody else has ever followed up on that safe walk.
I could do the follow-up as you're telling me right now. I'm like, I don't know when this happened, but again, everything we do is under a study. Everything we do, we have to confront the people and say, hey, I need some of your land to give me an easement, to widen up the road, to widen sidewalks. I still have to go to the people. I can't just, you know, say, hey, we're going to put a road in without consulting you. If they include sidewalks, then I'm going to need more width. Because the infrastructure is in now. And you got to give allowance for your hydro pole, your water line. Now we're talking sewer. So sidewalks were like what we're doing in Ganadago. It's tight over there. A lot of people are walking there. And I don't know about this, is that a company or is it like a...
It's a program under the federal government. Jacobs, I remember, she was involved in bringing them in here when she worked for Mohawk Council. And that's the last I ever heard of it. I thought we were going to get sidewalks on the island.
Okay. There's a question over here and then we'll come over here.
Yeah, are they going to build up the roads to withstand the weight for today's age?
Well, that's...
The equipment that's going through the roads, that's what did a lot of the damage. The heavy equipment that's going through this, that they're bringing in bigger trucks and stuff. Well, it seems like they're not built enough for those trucks that are coming in.
What happened was what we're doing there, this question did come up at the table, and the police force are aware of this now. When you put the signs up for the road restrictions in the spring, it's up, but nobody abides to it. They bring it, like you said, the trucks are coming in 24/7
and... ran those tandems down that way to cross, down the Hill, back and forth. The last two projects down there. What do you think toward that road up?
Well, that's what this...
That road is not built for tandem.
No, it ain't, but that's what they're gonna be doing, and they're gonna be putting the signs up, and they're gonna be enforcing them now. We had a meeting with the chief of police, and he's putting that on the front burner. So when you put the signs up, there's signs up now. Still nobody abides to it.
The slide has a lot of march on it.
Yeah, I know.
No base. You can only go down so far.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that note down for our working team.
It's a good follow-up. Let's mark that as a follow-up item.
Yeah.
Report back on how we will look into that. Right here, questions?
I'm happy that we're finally getting our roads fixed, so I'm proud of that. But the other thing I want to bring up was, and Joe knows, the road coming from Moville to where I live, which is just always, the ditches are almost at the same level, so we're always getting flooded out. And I had asked before if they could maybe dig, you know, in a ditch there to make it like deeper so that the water can flow. And we found out that our pipes in the driveway is filled with garbage. I'm talking about garbage that people throw out and the water pushes it underneath the pipe so it gets backed up. But what I don't like is the way the ditch and my yard, they're at the same level. I'm wondering if there's anything they can do about that.
Okay, well, we'll bring that back to, I'll even check, I'll bring Kennedy over, we'll take pictures and we'll address that.
All right, thank you. Anything else on the report?
Oh, one more. One more about the Seaway is, the federal bridge has started doing some construction to finalize their project there. They start to remove some of the fences in the court. They're staking out stuff. They're within their lines. They're not out, stepping out. And it's a part of their $75 million project that's got to get done. That's from the bridge right to the other side. Have you seen them out there? That's what they're doing. They're trying to removing that fence right now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, the last item that we wanted to provide an update and some background information to you on is the recent announcement by the Ontario government as well as the Mohawk Council that we've been approved for a grant to potentially expand natural gas onto Cornwall Island. So a bit of context in that is that in the late spring, early summer, the Enbridge Gas had approached us for the potential of applying to Ontario for some subsidy monies through a fund that was available to expand natural gas into areas of, or into communities, into areas that do not have natural gas now. At the time, Council received a presentation from the representative of the company. And at that time, Council decided that we would go ahead and submit the joint application to the fund. One of the big discussions that we had was that we said that at that time we wouldn't consult the community or bring this out to the community until we knew that the application was successful, meaning that the grant was approved, because we do know that there's a lot of different feelings about natural gas, about oil companies, and we felt that if we were at that time to start having that conversation with the community and say that we have potentially a fund available to expand, we would go through a lot of time and energy to talk to the community about it, and we didn't know if the application would actually be successful or not. So there's no sense in saying what if and it never happens. So at that time, Council endorsed a joint application to the Ontario government for some monies to support expansion of the natural gas onto Cornwall Island. We had received notification in last month or the month before that the application was successful for a subsidy of about $3.4 million. We do know that the approximate cost to build the entire system onto Cornwall Island would be around $8.5 million. The Ontario government would contribute some, Enbridge Gas would contribute the rest. So where we're at right now is there is a natural gas pipeline that runs from Cornwall to Messina that has been on Cornwall Island since 1962. It started flowing gas in 1962. Since then, the community has not had any benefit from that gas pipeline until 2009. The Mohawk Council negotiated a land use agreement with Enbridge Gas, and since 2009 receives an annual payment for the transmission line only, which is from the north side to the south side of Cornwall Island. At that time, the federal bridge was started in 2002 to look at replacing the existing high-level bridge, and it was at that time that after 2002, up until 2005, 2008, there was negotiations between Enbridge Gas and the community about getting consent to have the pipeline on Cornwall Island. It wasn't until 2009 that the community, that we had entered into agreement then. As part of the agreement in 2009, there is the ability to tap into the gas pipeline. Well, actually, there's the ability to conduct a feasibility study, and then to act, if the community is prepared, can start looking at that. So we have a grant available to begin the conversation with the community about the potential of bringing natural gas to Cornwall Island. In 2015, 2016, this council was actually presented with a petition from the Gawanoga residents asking council to look at alternative ways, other sources of energy for Cornwall Island to help combat the high cost of electricity on Cornwall Island. Us residents on Cornwall Island pay about double about what you residents in Akwesasne and Gannadigo pay in electricity rates. We do know that the cost of energy continues to rise. This is one of the options that we have brought forward to the community to consider. This project is not going to go forward without the community's approval. Over the next several months, we will roll out information, one, about what natural gas is, what the benefits are of natural gas, what are the risks of natural gas. As well, we'll talk with the community and see if the community actually wants natural gas going down Cornwall Island. Because one of the things that's important to note is that there's no sense in building a pipeline down Cornwall Island to potentially hook up to it if nobody wants to hook up to it. So if there's no customers, basically, it doesn't make the project feasible. So really, that is where we're at right now. We have not set out a direct plan of rolling this information out, but it's based on what the community will have to say about this, whether or not it proceeds, as well, whether or not people are prepared to actually hook up to the gas line, even if the community is okay with it. People have to convert. There's a cost to convert as well, to be able to go from either oil or electricity or whatever it may be to a natural gas product. That is really, in a nutshell, the project itself right now, where it's at. Again, we will roll out information sessions, again, about what it is, what natural gas is, what the project will look like. We will do this independently as well as in collaboration with Enbridge Gas. We will be conducting an environmental assessment, which will be done in collaboration with our Department of Environment and the Environment Department of Enbridge Gas to look at what those environmental impacts are of the pipeline. So putting a natural gas pipeline in. Just a bit of a note, the pipeline that actually runs through Cornwall Island from the one side to the other is a 12-inch natural gas steel pipeline, which is inspected every 2 years through a process. What they potentially would run down Cornwall Island is probably potentially a plastic pipe that probably won't be any more than 2 inches large, depending on, it all depends on how much demand there is. If there was something on the end of Cornwall Island that needed a lot of gas, the pipeline would be bigger, but if it's all residential, it'd be relatively small for the most part. In the back?
So what's the cost? Like, you've laid it all out, but you haven't, are you going to inform the community members that live in Gawanoga the monthly cost of natural gas is going to be a bill because it's not free? And where does that money go to? Does it go to council or does it go to the Enbridge?
Yeah, so through the process of the education, we would work out some of those numbers as to, it costs X amount of dollars to fill your tank now. Through the course of a winter, if you were to convert, we would start rolling, do the numbers and show people exactly how much they would save. As far as who they would pay, it would be the gas company. One of the things though, when council agreed to go into this study, they said we will not go into this study, or we will not go into this process unless Enbridge agrees that we should have the ability at some point to buy the infrastructure. So to start, it will be Enbridge's infrastructure. If we as a community are at some point in a position where we want to make this our own gas company or a partner in this gas company, that option will be available. And the reason why, this is not at the forefront is right now we're not in a position to make a financial investment to become a partner in the project itself. It's not, getting the access is one thing. If 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we say, you know what, we're doing well, this is, the community feels that we should own this asset now, we can buy the asset then. So that's one of the conditions council has set out at the forefront in going down this process. So, question here.
Go ahead and clarify that pipeline, because when you said it earlier, I says there's a lot of public misconceptions going on of visualizing the pipelines, what they are showing out there that are this big around or that big around in comparison to a 2-inch pipeline to what this really is. I'm glad you clarified that. That was going to be my opinion. Clarify, making sure in the future your statements, you know. She brought it out to us.
Okay, right here.
Now, you mentioned infrastructure. Is retrofitting the gas lines into residential homes, which means everybody right now that's on oil, propane, those furnaces are obsolete, so they'll be required to get upgrades. Who incurs the cost, council or the homeowner?
So right now, that has not been entirely worked out. How it would, we are in discussions with Ontario to try to get some subsidy money specifically for conversion, so that the homeowner can say, you know, I have fuel oil now, I want to go to natural gas. We're trying to get that specifically. We do know that there are programs available for rebate systems individually as well, but there are also kind of rent-to-own that Enbridge, if this proceeds, can put us in the position to be able to have rent-to-own systems type thing. Ultimately, at the end of the day, as it exists now, unless we find subsidy, it will be the homeowner's cost to convert to natural gas. But we are actively, if the project goes forward, we're actively looking for subsidies or other programs available to community members. Right here.
The pipeline that's going north to south, what do you get for that, from that?
About 100,600 annually, so per year.
Can that be used to offset the cost for the residents?
Yeah, so currently right now there's probably almost $2 million. No, maybe not that much. Probably $1.6 million that we've received from Enbridge, sitting in an account now. It potentially could be used for that. Now that's up to council. I mean, we've had a lot of discussions what we should do with that. I might add that in 2009, when we signed that agreement, there was an infrastructure payment made at that time for $1 million to the community. That's why that money sitting there now is about $1.6 million, because what we said as part of the negotiations was, what about all the past, kind of the past grant? And they said, well, we'll pay you $1 million at that time. So. But yes, that is an option. Here.
A lot of people on the island want a vote for only then. Is that something that's going to happen?
Well, I mean, we haven't made that decision yet. I mean, one would argue that, you know, it's a Cornwall Island, you know, we'll say issue or file. It's ultimately up to council whether or not, it's up to the council in consultation with the community what the approval process will look like. So it hasn't been determined if it'll be Cornwall Island only or all communities. We don't have an answer on it.
Is it possible to do that?
It's up to council, yes. And council could say we'll run a referendum for Cornwall Island residents only to decide whether or not this should happen. But they could also say all districts will vote.
How could that happen if it's negatively affecting possible for other ones? Like, how is that even a possibility?
The decision is based on what the community is feeling about this, and if the council feels that there's not enough, that it's the best interest to run a referendum, then that's what will happen. But I just want to say again too, though, if we can say yes all we want, but if nobody's going to convert, and there's no money to convert, and people don't want to hook up, you know, there is kind of two elements to it as well. Right? They won't just run a bare line down with nobody connected.
Has there ever been any study on renewable energies for households?
Yeah, so the one anomaly for Cornwall Island, which is a bit challenging, is that Ontario government has a lot of rebates and they have a lot of subsidies, and they provide pretty handsome programs to people that have renewable energy such as solar and wind. They actually buy that energy from the producer. The challenge on Cornwall Island is that if you were to set up, you know, a farm of wind turbines or solar panels on Cornwall Island, the government, because of the arrangement of Cornwall Electric, they don't have to buy that power back. So the programs that subsidize natural or clean energy is designed to feed the Ontario grid per se. Cornwall Island is not part of the Ontario grid. Cornwall Island is part of the Quebec grid, so which makes it a bit challenging for these renewable energies. Now, having said that, what technology exists that can support kind of behind the fence or microgrids are, you know, some of them are quite expensive and others are not proven, right? So if we were to say we're only on solar energy, it means we have to be able to store the energy, it means we have to be able to have reliable energy. We have to have, you know, things like that. Those get pretty costly, right? And at the end of the day, it would be the community that would have to foot the bill on these sort of things. So that's just, you know, a disclaimer on that. We have done through the economic development in Daho-Denawaka some other studies on alternative energies. It hasn't all entirely been ruled out, right? I'm just telling you some of the context of that. We've also looked at creating one grid for the entire community, which would, you know, level the, would lower Cornwall Island and make the same price everywhere for electricity. Because this is, the electricity cost is a huge driving factor for a lot of our people in our, you know, in our community members. And that's, you know, we're trying to respond with options.
Have you ever like done a background check on the Enbridge history and their history with Native communities?
Yeah. So we do, you know, the corporate values and the corporate reputation is important to us as well. We don't want to be in, you know, in arrangements or agreements with companies that not or may not believe in the same values as us. I mean, that will be something that we will talk about with the community and roll that information out as well. Right? There's no sense in going into deals with people that don't have the same values as us.
They're actually responsible for the largest inland oil spill in U.S. history. I also have a document here that I want to pass to you guys. 20 major incidents of them destroying wetlands, hundreds of thousands of gallons spilled all over the United States and also Canada. So it's a really big decision if you do decide to use these people because they've been proven that they do not care about our mother at all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We can take that from you. I mean, as stewards of Mother Earth, you know, this is the forefront for us. I mean, you know, the use of fossil fuel is something that, you know, we all continue to use. There's not a lot of horse and buggies out there or electric cars. You know, vehicles in which we come in are gas. You know, gas is, you know, the refining process for that is all on its own. You know, arguably natural gas is kind of one of the less of the horse, so to speak, but they're all bad, right? So, I mean, our responsibility to the environment is sevenfold, you know, I mean, it's every area. So, I mean, this is absolutely on our minds, right? I mean, we're creating options for the people to think about it, taking it to the community. It's ultimately up to the community. It will not happen behind closed doors at this council's table, I can assure you that. Yes.
As you may know, we've been manning the fire over the Union Fire for about half to 2 weeks now, proving to you that solar is a viable source of energy.
And also the power of the St. Lawrence River, you can also create electricity from the current of the river itself.
Hydroelectric turbine.
And you can also make money from selling this energy, not necessarily to Ontario. You can always look at foreign investments that will also buy this energy from you. So in twofold, you can make money and you can also provide your own clean energy.
Yeah, no, the climate, where we are right now, we don't have, you know, $10 million to invest in a renewable energy project right now, right? I mean, the reality is that this project will cost about $8.5 million. The Ontario government's going to do $3.5 million. The company of Enbridge will pay the rest, right? If we were, you know, maybe if we're, you know, a year from now with a 239, if accepted by the community, we have $20 million to talk about renewables, we can do that, right? I mean, that's ultimately up to the community. We're just talking about what some of those options are now. I mean, we don't rule these things out. And when I talked about the one electricity grid for all of the community, that would include tapping into the hydro dam that's there, that's supplying Messina at a rate that's, you know, like 4 cents a kilowatt, when we're paying 16 cents a kilowatt on Cornwall Island, you know, and it's like 8 cents here in Snai and St. Regis. So, it's still a
solar generator.
Yeah. Yeah. So, go ahead and do that in the back.
I just wanted to say, should it go down the road in the direction of planning and everything, just additional comments to include future infrastructure of wastewater so that it's accounted for during their design process?
Yeah.
Should it go down that road, as opposed to,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yes.
Yeah, is there any surplus energy from the surrounding communities that we can get more cheaply than the energy that we're getting right now?
So when I talked about the one grid, that would actually physically mean connecting all of our electricity grids into one. Right?
Okay.
So as it exists now, it's not. And you know, Ontario has the highest electricity rates. To be able to buy electricity and put it to Cornwall Island only or to Sinai, we have to buy, unfortunately, we'd have to buy the infrastructure, so the poles and everything that goes with it, to be able to power our own system. Again, it's about the investment. We don't have the money right now to make those investments. But if we were to have physical connections between Cornwall Island, Sinai, and Hogansburg, we could make it one grid. Right? But we're talking, you know, probably $50–60 million to do something like that. This isn't, you know, this is not, the only reason we're having really this conversation is because Ontario is prepared to kick in some cash to be able to do this, if that's what the community wants. It is not, again, I repeat, it's not a done deal. Right? We want the community to understand what the benefits are, what the risks are, and, you know, to understand what the, you know, what natural gas, where does natural gas come from? How do we get natural gas? You know, it's not just, you know, sticking a pipe in the ground and taking it out. There's a lot of environmental factors as well. So this will roll out over, you know, the next several months. There is a drop dead date, and that's, I believe, 2022, that the project has to be completed in order to get the subsidy from the Ontario government. Of course, that's, you know, that's over 3 years. We anticipate that it'll probably 6 to 8 months of having this conversation with the community to get to, you know, is this where we want to go? There's a lot of moving parts.
Are there any stipulations for, like, down the line for crude oil also?
No. Oh, no. I mean, the agreement that we have for the pipeline running from, you know, north to south on Cornwall Island is strictly for that product. If anything were to change with that, we'd have to renegotiate it with us. I mean, the likelihood of it changing is pretty slim because the product only goes in, the gas only goes into Messina, right? So if they were to start running fuel oil or you know, crude oil, where's it going to go? You know, Messina? So, highly unlikely.
You say we're under the Quebec national grid, so why doesn't Cornwall Island get your power from Quebec?
Yeah. It actually does come from Quebec through Cornwall Electric.
Because Cornwall buys their power from Quebec.
Yeah. It's a matter of buying the poles on Cornwall Island and making it our own system. You have to buy them.
They should have did that years ago. We never pushed for it.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think the kicker is that, you know, we've got a hydro dam that's selling that bulk power to the power companies for about 2 cents, right? And we're paying all, you know, much more than that. Okay, so are there any other questions in relation to that? Yes?
Isn't it possible when you get these experts to come in that it's not just Enbridge representatives?
Yep.
Because they got a good way with words.
Yeah, no, we are looking at bringing in some independent people to help educate and talk about this with the community, because we do recognize that the company, you know, arguably has a benefit to gain. Those papers, if you want to leave that with us.
Yeah, leave it with the EA right here to make sure she'll distribute it.
All right, so I want to thank you for that. We are going to move along to the next item, which is the business from the floor. So I do want to open up the floor to community. If there's any item that you want to discuss or address council with, address the council. Yes, in the back.
I was just kind of wondering about the sewage plant that was supposed to be done in Sinai, that was said 3 years ago. Council's now coming up to an election, and prior to this council, city council, they were supposed to have that done last council. So, and then they dumped all that gravel on the site of a new building, and nothing's been done, and it's now been 3 years. And it's a waste of $250,000 sitting there. So whatever happened to the sewage and that building?
I can answer that. this phase with the road, with we talked about,
We talked about the roads, so the roads are done, what about the sewage?
they gave us the 1.6 for the roads. And on top of that, they gave us 3.2 million for the sewer upgrade. So with this first step, what DTS took, they went out and they hired the engineer, he's gonna engineer the road. Now the next step is coming, within about a week or two, same thing is gonna happen. Jay is gonna bring the MCA to council to accept an engineer confirmed they're gonna do the sewer upgrade. We have the money for that. 3.2 mil is in that box for the upgrade of that sewer. So we're just, it's the next step.
What about the building?
What's that?
The building.
Oh, the building, they put the dirt there, and what it does, the collapse in 20 feet down, it's all sponge, because the water table's too high. They gotta crush that sponge. That's why that dirt is there. And when it's done...
It's been 3 years. Have they checked it?
Yeah, they're testing it. And what it does, when that happens, when that's solid, they keep testing it. And on top of that, they're gonna drive piers in there. They can't just leave it. And they're gonna take about 10 feet of that dirt back off. That's when everything settles. But the weight of that dirt has gotta be on there to crush that sponge down underneath. Because if they don't, that's always gonna move. It's always gonna be a floating area. So even when it does crush, they're gonna drive the piles in too for a backup.
But I was at the presentation that you presented, and they said that it would take 2 years and you'd be able to build the building. It's been 3.
Well, they're gonna follow the testing of that. They said 2, could be 3. They're gonna wait that out to see. They gotta make sure they keep testing that. It's gotta be strong. They test it every year.
And what's the results?
The result is they're still on waiting on that. When they're finally sure that it's strong enough, they can give us the okay. Then they drive the piers. But they're just on hold right now.
Thank you.
Okay, here and then, yeah.
April, who on council has portfolio for land acquisitions for Galvin?
Not nobody here, Dennis does.
Dennis does?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, right here and then back here.
I noticed in yesterday's Frio there was an article regarding Parks Canada and then the shoreline of Cornwall. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, so the Transport Canada has provided an update to the City of Cornwall regarding surplus lands. Those actually go from about where the OPG Visiting Center is all the way down to the part of East End of Cornwall. The city, we've had some dialogue with them in the past about this. We are going to write them again and inform them that the lands there are subject to claims by us, and that anything that they do with that property, whether it be sell, divest, gift, whatever it may be, that they have to do in consultation with us, and that they have a duty and obligation to do that. They haven't decided exactly how they're going to get rid of it. They just said that they're going to get rid of it. But of course, they said probably 4 years ago that they were going to get rid of it as well. So that's what we're in the process of right now, reminding them. If there are any sales or any transfers that occur without our acknowledgement or consent, we will take action. So we do want to be in the position where we acquire those lands.
I have an issue. I've had an issue for the last 3 years. Last year, I was approved for that septic tank thing where they set up a whole new septic tank. Well, I waited all summer for that, and fall came around. And I says, when these guys going to be putting the septic tank in? And the guy says, he says, we gave it to somebody else. I says, what do you mean you gave it to somebody else? I says, that thing's meant for my family. He says, the only reason why they gave it to somebody else was they had to bring a crane in to remove the septic tank. That was 3 years ago. Today, Well, last summer, I had environmental come down and look at it. They says it's a hazard, something's gonna be done. And if you go on my yard, you see nothing but like black mud. I mean, it's so black. And they says, that's not good. He says, that's a hazard. And nobody ever told me that they gave the septic tank away. Here, I'm waiting. And Joe and I were both waiting. And Joe says, well, you better find out what's going on. And we're trying to find out. We never got the septic tank. We're still stuck with a problem. I mean, my septic is spilling into my yard. And a lot of people are complaining. But what I don't like is the way they gave that to somebody else. I mean, they could have at least notified me and said, well, we can't do this. We're going to have to give it to somebody else. Why bother, you know? So that's the thing I want to know. I want to see if they can come down and look at that septic tank and maybe replace it. Even the guy says, that septic tank's so old, that's obsolete today. He says, I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
I said, well, something's going to be done.
We will follow up on that. I do know that there is some potential other funding coming available through housing for septic rehabilitation. So there may be some other opportunities, but we'll follow up on that. So I know Joe has been looking into it, but we will, my office will as well. Unfortunately, there's no housing portfolio here, so. Yes.
You guys have a condemned administration building in St. Regis this time, or not?
So we are in the process of, we've budgeted to have it taken down. It probably will come down sometime this summer. But oddly enough, it's actually in the name of the Health Canada. So we're actually going to write them and tell them to take their buildings. It's because the building was actually, when it was built by Health Canada, and it was a clinic. And when we started doing this budgeting exercise to find money to make money available to take it down, we found out that the CP is actually in Health Canada's name. So we are really going to write them and tell them that you have a building here, you have a CP, take it out. With any luck, they will. And then we can take the land from it. It is ours, but yeah, so that's the plan. There was right here, I think. Yeah.
I understand that there's a new bill that's going to provide Indian status to a whole bunch of new people. And I'm wondering if next month, if we could have the chair of the membership board do a presentation on that new bill that's coming into effect and how and if it's going to affect us. And I think I'd also like to hear from the chair of the Elders Council as well on how they do make their decisions.
Okay. We can look to OBS portfolio, taking various notes over there so that we can follow up and have see if we can get a presentation on it. It's a good point. I mean, the government is introducing legislation to create more Indians, and we want to know, we'll share with you what the impact is.
Yeah.
Okay. Mayor.
Yeah, just wanted to give a suggestion for renewable energy. The best places to go to, I was talking to an elder that came to the Unity Fire, and he approached universities, because a lot of the universities have been chomping at the bit to work with First Nations communities on improving infrastructure and things like that. So it would be good to just look out for the universities that are like really trying to go for the renewable energy. You can also find money and grants also from that place, from those universities to help with that. So
yeah, no, that's good. Thank you for that. Yes.
How close are they getting that program, Healthy Homeschooling?
So we actually were at we made a presentation the other day to the Ontario government to get some monies to do a rehabilitation program for homes. So I think that probably, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll have an indication of whether or not that's been approved or not. So we're actively, the portfolio in the department that Jim runs is actively pursuing that. But we did make a presentation this week to the board to say that, you know, this is the need and we're hoping that we can have it. As well, we expect some monies to become available for sewer rehabilitation within the next little while from the Akwesasne Community Settlement Fund, which will be administered through our housing program. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
With Birch Road, there's a whole big old thing with the water line, but I don't need update on that right now, but is it possible to get more water? Because I think right now we got about 15 cases of bottled water we have to buy, so we have enough water for the month. And we'd rather not have all that waste. Because I think we get 9 bottles right now, and that lasts about 2 weeks, 3 weeks at the most.
Yeah, I apologize. You brought that up probably 3 months ago. I thought it was addressed, but we will follow up on it. And I know that the road itself, there is some progress being made on getting
So, just clarification, you said 9 bottles, which only would last 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah. Because I think we have to buy at least 6 more for the rest of the month, and that we go and buy it, have to go to Cornwall and get it ourselves.
Okay.
And that's just for food.
Yeah.
So like, it'd probably be like double that for drinking water and
yeah, no, we'll get follow up on that. You did raise that, and I didn't know I didn't have
it's a
it.
little different because there's a lot of people in my house, but then the next door, there's only one person. And the same next.
Yeah.
So like you raise all our water, we're not all using it.
Yeah, okay. That's a good point too. There may be some opportunity there, so. Anything else that anybody wants to discuss this evening? So, all right, so I do have a resolution that I need to read for the record for consideration. So it's the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne accepts and approves the general meeting minutes of March 29, 2018. But I have a mover, please, Joe, and second by Steve. Discussion on the resolution. Question being called on the resolution. All in favor of the resolution? Any against the resolution? There is one against, so the resolution is carried. All right, so the announcements is that the district meetings will be May 14th for Akwesasne, May 14th as well for Gawanoge, and May 14th for Ganadago, all starting at 6 p.m. Our next general meeting is tentatively scheduled for May 24th at the Gawanoge Recreation Center. So I do want to say on behalf of council, I want to thank all of you very much. This will actually be the last general meeting that we will hold in Akwesasne with this term of council. So on behalf of all of council, it's been a real pleasure to be able to serve all of you, and we hopefully see you at the next general meeting, which will be on Cornwall Island. So thank you very much. Motion to adjourn, Sean and Ken. Thank you.